Hola! Today, we're going to talk about verb conjugation in Spanish. But what even is verb conjugation and why do we care about it? I'm going to give you an example in English to help you understand. I washes the dishes. Does that sound right? No. We know that in English, we're supposed to say, I wash the dishes, or we're supposed to say, she washes the dishes. That's just what sounds right. So that is verb conjugation. Verb conjugation is when you make the verb match the subject, match whoever you're talking about. Why do we have to do that? Because that's just grammar. If we don't do it, then it sounds funny when we talk. To understand verb conjugation in Spanish, it's important that we remember the most basic form of a verb. Do you remember what it's called? There's a special name for it. It's called an infinitive. In English, infinitives always start with the word to. For example, to talk. That's the infinitive, to talk. To read. That's the infinitive, to read. To write. These are the most basic forms of the verbs. Once we start changing them to match the subject, then that means we are conjugating them. So for example, she talks. We don't say she to talk to me on the phone. We say she talks to me on the phone, or I talk to her on the phone. Once we start making changes to these things, then that means we are conjugating them. In Spanish, there are 3 types of infinitives. What's an infinitive again? The most basic form of a verb. Yes, good job. So in English, again, they all have the word to in front of them. In Spanish, all infinitives end in either AR, ER, or IR. All of them. There is never an exception. For example, hablar. Hablar means to talk. Leer. Leer means to read. Escribir. Escribir means to write. So these are the most basic forms of the verb. They all end in either AR, ER, or IR. That is going to be very, very, very important when we are conjugating these verbs. Because if I want to say I talk to my friend, I can't just say yo hablar. That's going to sound like me saying I to talk to my friend. It doesn't sound right. I can't just say, she talks to me every day. Ella hablar. It doesn't sound right. We have to make some changes to these verbs. Now, today, we are only going to talk about AR. And I'm going to tell you what the pattern is and what you do to conjugate these verbs. To think about verb conjugation, I'm actually going to have you think about a garden. Do any of you have gardens? Have you ever worked in a garden, or maybe you have a rose bush or someone you know? I have here a beautiful flower. I'm sure it's the most gorgeous flower you have ever seen. Okay, I'm going to turn it sideways. What usually happens to a flower over time? So you have the stem, we have the flower. With some time, the flower falls off. So I'm going to cut it off. Okay, the flower falls off. Oh, bye flower. And then what happens? With some more time, another flower grows back. Okay, so then, another flower grows back. We're going to think about our verbs the same way. Part of a verb is actually called the stem. Like this is the stem of the word, and then this is the ending. So I'm going to add some artwork. Here we go. And we have again, hablar. This whole word is the infinitive. We're going to notice that the ending's in AR, that's the ending. And here we have the stem, abu. I'm going to write down step 1 of conjugating verbs. Step 1, notice the ending. Okay, So when we notice this ending, we're going to want to notice, does it end in AR, ER, or IR? For right now, we're going to notice it's an AR ending, okay? Step 2, cut off the ending. And right now, I would like you to write this verb on a piece of paper. Cut off the ending. Bye-bye. We are now left with the stem. Step 3, put a new ending on it. This is the tricky part. What is the new ending? There is a chart in Spanish called the verb conjugation chart that will help us know what ending we need to put on it according to what we're talking about. So let me show you that chart here. Here is the verb chart. If you talk to a native Spanish speaker, they maybe have never seen this chart before, and they don't need this chart. This chart just helps us know how to use the language. If you remember the lesson about subject pronouns in Spanish, this will look very familiar to you. Because again, we have here the subject pronouns in a box. And if we notice, it says AR verb endings. In the lesson about ser, we changed the verb and then we put a whole new word here. But we're going to do something a little different. What we're going to put in here is just the ending. It's going to be a new flower that could be used and get attached to the stem. So here we go. I'm going to write the endings here for you. Here we have the verb endings in Spanish. Remember, hablar, we started with the whole word. We started with hablar, and then we cut off the flower. The flower fell off. Now I want to replace it with another ending, another flower. But how do I know which one to pick? Well, it depends what I want to say. Let's pretend I'm talking about talking, that I talk all the time, okay? So I'm going to say yo, because I remember that means I. If you forgot what these subject pronouns are, go watch the lesson about subject pronouns in Spanish. But let's just pretend that you remember all of them. Hopefully you do. I'm talking about myself, yo. So I want to say I talk. Yo, I'm going to take this stem and put it right there. Yo hablo. So that's how you would say I talk in Spanish. Yo hablo. What if you want to say you talk? You're talking to your friend. So we're going to use tú. Tú hablas. Tú hablas. You talk. What if you want to say he talks? Well, then you would say él habla. What if you want to say they talk? You remember that they is ellos. So ellos, you put that there. Hablan. Hablan. What if you want to say we talk? Nosotros hablamos. Hablamos. What if you want to say you all talk? Like, and you're in Spain, you want to use vosotros? Habláis. Habláis. I also want to acknowledge, if you visit some Central American countries and some countries in South America, there are some places that have another ending, and it's this one here for vos. Basically, it's the same as tú. Vos hablas. Vos hablas. If you're taking a Spanish class, most grammar charts just include these endings, but I just want to acknowledge this one does exist. And if you ever travel to those countries or talk to someone from that country, you're probably going to hear this a lot. Okay, so let's try another verb. We're going to try this one, lavar. Do you remember what the first step was? I'm going to write the steps right here. So here we have step 1. Step 1 is notice the verb ending. So if we take a look here, we notice the verb ending is AR. Step 2, cut off the ending. Now, this is something that a lot of my students forget to do. We get so excited about verb conjugating that we're just like, oh, yo lavaro, yo lavaras. You need to make sure you cut that ending off. Cut it off. Okay, and I highly recommend You get some paper, you get some scissors, you write down these verbs and you cut it off with the scissors because it's going to help your brain remember that you have to chop off that ending before you can put a new ending on. Just like a bush, you have to lose that flower before you can get another flower, okay? And that brings us to step 3. Yay, it worked. So step 3 is to put on the new ending. But how do you know what ending to put on? Well, again, it depends on the subject pronoun. So I took that, I noticed the verb ending was AR. I cut off that ending. Now I'm ready to put on the new ending according to whoever I want to talk about. So let's pretend I want to say, I wash the dishes. Well, I'm going to stick this right here. Yo lavo. What if I wanted to say, we wash the dishes because we wash them together? It's so fun. Nosotros lavamos. Lavamos los platos. Yes, lavamos. Are you getting the hang of it? How about they wash? How would you say they wash? Ellos lavan. Yeah, ellos lavan. Another really cool thing about Spanish, if you noticed, a lot of these endings only are used with one pronoun. These ones, okay, it could be a few of them, but usually by the context of the sentence, you know if you're talking about él, ella, or usted. So because of this, many times people don't even use the subject pronouns. Like once it's implied and people already know who you're talking about in the sentence, I might just say, lavo los platos. I wash the dishes. I don't have to say yo lavo los platos. Because if I just say lavo los platos, well, there's nothing else it could mean because no other subject pronoun is associated with this, okay? And remember, the reason that these are in the same box is because these subject pronouns will get this ending for the verb, okay? So these they're in the same box only because they're all going to get the same ending when you're trying to talk about this. All right, let's try another example using these steps. Usar, which means to use. Step 1, notice the verb ending. So notice the ending. What's the ending on this verb? AR. Very good. Yes, I want to write it here now in these letters. Okay, so we have the ending. Second step. Step 2, cut off the ending. Perfect. So now we have the stem, and we can replace the ending that we cut off with a new ending. Put on the new ending, that's step 3. Let's pretend we want to say we use. We're saying we use the computer. How would we say it? Usamos. Yes. Usamos la computadora. Yes. Let's say you wanted to say they use the computer. Ellos usan la computadora. Or maybe you're talking to your friends. You all use the computer. Ustedes usan la computadora. How would you say she uses the computer? Well, she is ella. Usa la computadora. Muy bien. Excelente. Is this making sense to you now? I hope so. Okay, but now let's say you have your friend Sarah, and Sarah uses the computer. So you want to say that. Sarah's name is not on this chart. So what verb should you use? Well, you're going to have to think a little bit. You're going to use that brain. Sarah, what pronoun would replace Sarah? Ella, for she. So we know that if you are talking about someone, one person, Sarah, it would go in this box. That means you would use the verb ending in that box. So you would say, Sara usa la computadora. Let's pretend though now, I want to say that Sarah and I talk on the phone, right? We're friends, we talk on the phone. Well, how do we say to talk again? To talk is hablar. So step 1, notice the verb ending, AR. Step 2, cut off the ending, okay? We're going to cut off that ending. Step 3, put on the new ending. But now it's a little tricky. Maybe you're a little confused. You're like, wait, Sara y yo? So if I remember Sara had been down here and then yo is here, so like what do I do? The answer is it is neither of these. Because remember, this side, you're just talking about one person, right? If we look, yo, one person. Tú, one person. He, one person. She, one person. Usted, you, formal, but one person. So this whole side of the chart is just one person. If you add a second person, you are now going to be popping on over to the other side of the chart. This side of the chart all is talking about plural people, like it's more than one person. For example, the word nosotros, what does it mean? It means we. So if you have yourself and you add one more person, that's we. Okay? He, and you add one more person, then you're going to be popping on over here to ellos. So thinking about this one, Sara y yo. Sara y yo means Sarah and I. What is one pronoun that could replace this whole phrase? Sarah and I. Sara y yo. Nosotros. Since we're both female, I would say nosotras. If I didn't want to say nosotras, I didn't want to say nosotras hablamos, I wanted to specify Sara y yo. Well, Sara y yo would go in this box. So I could say Sara y yo hablamos. It's still going to be the same verb ending. Sara y yo hablamos. If you're talking about animals or things or anything else that's not a person, you'll conjugate the verb depending on whether whatever you're talking about is singular or plural. The verb ending that you'll use on the verb will either be the same as the ending in the el, ella, usted box, or it'll be the same as the ending in the ellos, ellas, ustedes box. For example, if you wanted to say the car uses gasoline, you would say el carro usa gasolina. If you wanted to say the cars use gasoline, because you're talking about more than one car, you would say los carros usan gasolina. So these steps with this verb chart ending, these endings, will help you conjugate any verb in the present tense if it's a regular AR verb. Later on, you'll learn there are some verbs that are not regular. They're not going to follow this pattern, and they're going to cause us to think a little bit more. But you don't have to think about that yet. Okay? This regular verbs, they follow the pattern. You're going to notice the ending, cut off the ending, put on a new ending. To get fast at doing this, it takes lots and lots and lots of practice. And honestly, this isn't the only way to learn how to conjugate verbs in Spanish. If you're around it enough and you just practice and hear it, your ear will start to be able to tell which one sounds right. So this isn't the only way to do it. But this chart can be helpful if you are wanting to use it to help you produce the words, to help you figure out what would be the correct version of the verb. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Adios.